Oswald Black, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
It is awesome. I am so excited because I got to read an advanced reader copy of Wedding Bandits, and I love con man novels. So before we get into the book itself, give us just a brief character synopsis of yourself. How long have you been writing? How long have you been working on the book? Just give us a general overview of who Oswald Black is.
Okay, well, this is my debut novel,
Congratulations.
and it's been a long time coming. I actually started it in 2020,
Wow.
um, and my original goal was to get it published traditionally.
Hmm.
So I spent a year querying literary agents, a lot of rejection. I ended up getting one that was interested. Oh, sorry, let me go back a second. So I got a response that said my writing wasn't strong enough, and so that kind of like hurt me. So I
Yeah.
went back and rewrote everything. I also did a
Hmm.
lot more reading to
Hmm.
make sure that I was keeping up with the zeitgeist, I guess.
Hmm.
And then so when I started sending it out again, I got an agent that was interested in it, and they were reading it, but they didn't get back to me for over a year. So I was
Oh,
waiting on this,
wow.
thinking, well, if they're taking this long, they must really love it. They must be getting a deal ready for me. They must be like setting out the red carpet. But no, I got a rejection letter about a year later, and I was like, okay, well, you know what? I can't keep
Hmm.
waiting a year every time someone's interested in a book.
Yes.
So I'm gonna try self-publishing, but I'm gonna try to be very meticulous and
Hmm.
very focused about it and try to do all the steps right, and we'll see where it goes. So now I'm on the cusp of that release, and we'll see where that hard work has led me. But other than that, I'm pretty green when it comes to the publishing industry. I've tried to learn as much as I can in the time that I've been doing it. But yeah, I'm a little bit of a greenhorn.
You know what? Everyone starts somewhere. And honestly, I've been very impressed so far at the work you've been doing to bring the book to production point because you've been doing a pretty good job of sharing different steps as you're going through on Instagram.
Mhm.
And you're doing a good job of sharing bits about the book. Here are the things. And you use book sirens, I think, for like doing advanced reader stuff.
Mhm.
And really, that's awesome to see because I think something that I've found trying to self-publish is trying to do the getting the reviews front
Very
loaded
much so.
for the book
Yes.
coming out is so terribly important.
Yeah.
You've been doing a really good job with that.
Thank you. Thank you. And I just want to thank you personally because you were one of the people I contacted over 200 people
Hmm.
to review the book. And out of those 200 people, one person reviewed it. And you were the only person that actually told me they read it without me kind of like coming with my hat in hand saying, please read my book. So I was so taken aback by that, and just that gave me such a good feeling and hope. But I just want to say thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and sorry, what was the question? I forgot.
I was asking just generally, how did you get into this? What interested you in writing?
Okay, yeah, uh, I guess it started when I was in school. We used to have these scholastic book fairs
Hmm.
where and that was really fun. I grew up in the money was pretty tight in our house, but that was one of the things where they would always allow me to get a book or two that I really wanted. So I really got closer to reading that way. As I grew older, I became a restless child. So sitting down and reading was very hard for me. This was in my teens.
Yeah.
But I was still very much into art, so I started doing music, and I was in a couple bands, but I was
Hmm.
an absolutely terrible singer, and I maybe partied a bit too hard, and so that didn't work out for me too well. And then I've always really just wanted to do the art thing, and now that I'm a little bit older and I've settled down a bit,
Hmm.
writing has just come a lot easier, and it's almost like cathartic in a way because
Hmm.
it's almost like meditation when you're sitting there and you're writing and you're putting thoughts to paper and then kind of like making a reality. There's just some sort of like streamlined calmness that I really love about it. So I'm pretty much addicted to it now.
That's awesome. There is this amazing thing you said described as cathartic.
Mhm,
Writing is, I remember back when I was young, hearing someone say that the mark of a writer is if your first instinct, your reaction to a situation is to go for like pen and paper, is to start writing about the thing. And I think that that's so true in a lot of cases when
mhm,
your reaction becomes, oh, there's a story here, or there's that the experience of writing. So I've journaled most of my life and
mhm,
be having that. It's not that it's made me a better writer necessarily, but it's that I have that it makes me feel good to put on paper and just kind of list in my head, take what is bubbling here and get it
mhm.
onto the page. And I think creating fiction is even more fun with that because it's it's taking an emotion sometimes, something that you feel, and being able to construct a narrative around it, even if that narrative has nothing to do with the emotion you actually have.
Fair enough. I think in a way, like especially with wedding bandits, I noticed this, and I noticed it a little bit after because you were saying that
Hmm.
it doesn't necessarily have to do with the emotion,
Hmm.
the story. Um, and so I wrote it, thinking it was this like wild con man on the run kind of thing. And when I sat down and I was rereading it a couple times, I realized that there's this huge subtext about
Hmm.
being a good father that
Yeah.
I didn't really get when
Uh-huh.
I was writing it. I had no plan on making that
Hmm.
part of the subtext,
Hmm.
but I myself uh, grew up without a father
Hmm.
and have had moments in my life where I've had to be a father figure to people a little bit younger than me, and it like kind of all clicked. But it was never an intention for me to have that subtext. So I
Hmm.
totally get what you're saying when you say that sometimes
Hmm.
subconsciously it's like
Yes.
your mind working it out for you, even though
Yeah.
it's not letting you in on the secret though.
Well, and it's cool because those are the type of things that good writing becomes, is when the themes within the story come naturally. A lot of times, like I'll read stuff where they're like, you have to set out with what your theme is. And yes, that can be helpful, but I think it's more interesting to see just what like you said, that subconscious subtext
Mhm.
just evolved throughout the story. And the moment you said that, I went, yes, because that clicks. I remember that in the book, seeing it weave from beginning to end, because you do have multiple father figures in the
Mhm.
literal and figurative sense, and
Yeah.
seeing how they interact with the other characters. It's
Mhm.
that interesting how the mentor role makes such a significant difference. And they can also sometimes be the more fun characters. But before I get too far into the weeds on that, how did you settle on writing a con man story? Because uh, cards on the table, I was trying to beginning of the year work on the con man story of my own and just
Mhm.
kept circling on trying to figure out how to do it because really there aren't a lot of modern con man stories. And you've done an
Mhm.
amazing job in Wedding Bandits of telling a modern con man story that also feels timeless in the sense that with only a couple of exceptions, I feel like this story could take place anytime
Mhm.
with perennial type archetype characters that are con artists. So, what got you interested in that?
Okay, so originally it all kind of stemmed from my best friend was getting married,
Uh huh.
and there was this sense of we were all
Was he a shady
we
character?
we knew we couldn't we wouldn't be able to continue the life that we had lived. We knew we were all stepping onto this new path, and
Mm-hmm.
we would have to choose. Are we going to start off on the right foot here, and leave the past behind? Are we going to cling on to things
Mm-hmm.
um, that maybe aren't healthy to cling on to? And there was this feeling of kind of letting go of an old life and starting this new life. So that's it. It didn't really start as a con man story, but then as it evolved in the idea process, it was like, okay, these guys were too good friends to like not get into trouble, like and the more I played with it, the more it just seemed like these were just two guys who they had each other and everyone else could sort of kick rocks, and they were having fun while they were, scamming all these people, and they're so heartless in a way, and it's kind of like a guy thing because guys and girls
Hmm.
too, but like we can be so heartless sometimes when
Yes.
it's funny to our friends, like
It's
as long as we're
anything for the
laughing.
joke. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, and I think a lot of times, like personally and in society in general, sometimes the joke goes too far, and then that's
Hmm.
when maybe people are now on your heels trying to get back at you, or
Hmm.
and that's exactly what happens, right? Is these guys who maybe took their fun a little bit too far, and now some dangerous people are out for revenge. So it just kind of worked in on just like how we were with friends, and we're kind of a con store. We were kind of like these kind of guys, right? So
Next
uh,
level wedding crashers. That's what we
yeah,
get. They get themselves into the wedding party.
exactly. Actually, it was supposed to be a lot more of like kind of a romantic comedy in the beginning, but then as I was going, I was like, there's no way these people can do all these horrible things and like it it'd be okay at the end. But
Yes.
anyway, it's just like, like, the sun sets and they ride off in the sunset, everything's great. Like it just didn't seem morally acceptable
Yeah.
for that to happen. So I wanted to make it a little bit more realistic as to what might come of all that.
Uh-huh. And I
Yeah.
have to give you big props because it definitely has an Elmore Leonard-esque quality to it, where they are like doing the pattern that works really well. And this was the thing I found difficult writing con artists is that they have to be highly competent, and then the story has to it there has to be something that tilts that they didn't expect, that they could
Mhm.
not have calculated for. It's kind of like I'm not sure what your Star Wars familiarity is, but Grand Admiral Thrawn is a character who's like this Sherlock Holmes mastermind. The difficulty with
Okay.
writing him is he has to be wrong sometimes. How do you make the most competent guy wrong? And it always has to be something that they
I see.
didn't know and didn't
Yeah.
expect, which in this case it's that these guys did not know a very important piece of information, which comes
Yes.
back to bite them in the butt.
Yes.
And you do such a great job of integrating that threat of danger coming up until it gets to the culmination in the story, which, like I said, very Elmore Leonard-ish in the way that it has the criminal element with this comedic edge. I loved it. I thought it was really good.
That's a huge compliment because Elmore Leonard is such a big brass in the genre, and yeah, that's huge. The thing about the Wedding Bandits though is that sometimes they can be incredibly stupid as well.
Yes.
Um, like I don't want to give too much away, but in right away once you find out the con men, they're supposed to be parking a stolen car, and the first
Hmm.
thing they do is go for beers and get smashed, and that
Yes.
kind of is it leads like the plot
It's
into them getting caught, right?
Yeah, and it has this, it's really a fascinating thing because so one of my friends, he's a pilot, and he was commenting literally last night that there are certain things that in pilot school they teach you to be aware of. Some people, it's like five traits, but usually they come in pairs. Like he's impulsive and he has a sense of invulnerability. And those two things together are a bad combination because
Yes.
when you're impulsive and you think you're invulnerable, you're going to do something incredibly stupid. And especially if you're in the
Yeah.
air, that's a bad thing. And I think the con artists here have a similar thing where you get that you quickly understand, especially some of the characters more than others, think that they are the bomb. They cannot be caught. They are invulnerable. Sure, we did this, but it's going to be fine. Nothing can touch
Yes.
him.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, completely. And I don't know, again, we see kind of what happens with that kind of arrogance. Um, yeah, yeah. But I try to keep a balance where
Hmm.
just like that we talk about, like they're like kind of like brothers and really good friends, and you know, same with me and my friend. When the other person, sometimes one person is acting a little
Mm-hmm.
illogical, and the other has to pull him back in. And I really wanted to show that relationship with Mitch and Joey is that Joey wasn't always this. There were points in the book where Mitch
Mm-hmm.
also slipped up
Oh
by his,
yeah.
and then now it's Joey
Which
who
says
is
so much more when you do that part because we've seen that Joey's usually the one who tends to do that.
exactly,
So when
yeah,
Mitch is the one that needs to be called on the carpet, it's like,
yeah,
oh shoot, this
yeah,
is serious now.
yeah.
Even Joey sees this as a problem.
Yes, 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 yes. But I think that is it, it molded the friendship. I think because
Hmm.
that's what true friendship is about. It's like when one's lower, the other one's
Hmm.
trying to pull them out of the mud, and then vice versa, right?
Hmm. So what kind of research did you do as you were writing the book? Was there anything specific that you did to study con artists or how the different cons work? What what kind of went into that? Or was it just as you came to it, you figured it out?
Um, there was there was very well, I don't want to say that right away. I did interview a friend who was a mechanic. There's a car chase scene in there, and
Ooh.
I know nothing about cars.
Hmm.
So I needed to talk to him about driving stick.
Hmm.
How do you drive stick? I don't know. What's the process there? So he kind of went over how this would happen, and if there were certain maneuvers that were impossible, he would say, "No, you can't do that," or why don't he might do this. There's also a move when they're being chased by the FBI where they're going to spin them out, and it's called a pit maneuver.
Hmm.
So I had to learn about car chase tactics and how to, you know, stop a runaway vehicle. But other than that, I mean, it's a pretty fantastical story.
Hmm.
I don't think it's too down to earth or like scientific. But no, other than the car, and I don't think I did. I think it was, I've done a lot more research on different projects since. But
Hmm.
this first one was just a lot more character based. And
Hmm. Which
yeah.
I think is a strong way to do the story because it only works based on the characters. If the
Mhm,
characters, I was recently reading, we had them on the show, Matt Burt. He wrote Secrets of Story and the Secrets of Character. And his concept in Secrets of Character and Story was that basically people don't care about the story, they care about the characters. There's a reason
mhm.
why we can tell the same stories over and over again, providing characters are interesting enough to keep us coming back. So that's where we get things that are like Louis L'Amour novels, James Bond novels. At the end of the day, a lot of these stories tend to follow similar plot mechanics, but
Mhm.
because the character is interesting enough, we go back to it. And in this case, you've done a great job of this is a fantastical plot, but because the characters are strong enough, you're not going to pick apart plot holes as you're going through because you're enjoying the ride you're on with these type of people.
For sure. Yeah, 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 for sure. I think it's grounded in the sense, like you say, it's grounded in the sense of character. But and I've always tried to 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 do that is put like regular people in extraordinary events,
Circumstances.
and how would these people really deal with it.
Hmm.
um and yeah, I think it turned out okay.
Hmm. I would agree. So, what does your writing process look like? Do you have a specific routine that you go through? Writing a book, I don't think people that haven't tried before, they don't realize that it's like trying to climb a mountain oftentimes. It
Very tough.
takes literally each step of the way. But what did your process looking like for writing Wedding Bandits? What would that look like? And now, has it changed since that first book?
It's definitely, the process is sped up since.
Mhm.
I think before, when I first started, I would stare at the screen a lot more. Whereas now I just kind of I I have, before I write the actual thing, I have an outline of where the scene's gonna go.
Mhm.
So usually when I stop on one day, I'll do a little block of text of what's coming up, so that when I open the computer next time, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not looking around as, oh, this
Trying to
happened.
guess at it.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just basically I have a post-it note basically saying this is what you got to do, and then I'll do that, and then I'll leave another brick for the next time I go in. So that's what I'm doing now, and I've written 6 books since Wedding Bandits, and I can,
Awesome.
yeah, it's my pace has gotten good, and it takes me about 5 months now. Wedding
Hmm.
Bandits took me about a year,
Hmm.
and I think it was just more of, writer's block came a lot easier when I was doing Wedding Bandits. But the biggest change in that, I think, is that now I see it as kind of like a job, and I clock in and I write from a certain time to a certain time.
Hmm.
And I don't allow writing block. If I write badly, that's one thing, and
Yeah.
I can go and change that later. But just that not writing thing, that that's not in my repertoire anymore. I write for about 4 hours, 4 days a week, and
Nice.
before work. So
Hmm.
I don't really have too much of a social life. So I do a lot of writing, and reading. Um, and also reading too has really helped, because once you start getting in the flow and rhythm of prose,
Hmm.
you adopt it, just like you adopt a melody when you hear a song over and over
Hmm.
again, and it's stuck in your head. Same thing with, the syntax and the rhythm of the prose. It all just kind you get into that flow, and it's, so everything is a lot more natural now, which means I can do it faster. So yeah, yeah, that's it. It's just yeah.
Do you see a lot of, so you had made a comment about melody. You said that you used to do music. I'm just curious, do you see a lot of crossover in different practices and principles you used when you were doing music to the writing practice?
That's a tough one on the spot. I mean, rhythm is a huge thing. Rhythm is a huge thing. Practicing to get good at your craft is huge. Um, but that's a really tough question. I don't think I could answer that right on the spot. Um, but I think the biggest thing is just studying the craft, and so when you play music, and you're writing songs, like when I was doing it, I was in high school. What was big was like Blink 182 and Sum 41 and like pop punk. So you would find yourself, even if not intentionally trying to
Hmm.
copy their chord progressions, finding sounds that are pleasing to the ear
Hmm.
because you've listened to that. So when you hear
Yeah.
these things, you're like, this sounds good, but it sounds good for a reason, and because along the way you listened to another song and you were like, that sounds good, and they may
Hmm.
sound a little similar. So I think what reading more has done for me is allowed me to recognize those chord progressions, I guess,
Yeah.
in prose or stuff like that. Even if it's just like ending a chapter on like a cliffhanger, or a suspenseful note,
Hmm.
something like that. Or like when you have a paragraph and then it's like kind of setting something up, and then there's like one line that says like that contradicts, like he was trying to do this and then he failed on that thing, like that. Just like the way the prose are set up,
Hmm.
and so reading has definitely helped me organize that a lot easier.
Yeah. So with piggybacking on that, what have you been reading? What have you been? So I think it's Neil Gaiman. He's compared it to a compost heap. The idea is you get in a whole bunch of stuff, you put it in a pile and let it kind of just digest and stew, and then it gets fertilizer for you to then spread upon the garden of your ideas, which is a very Neil Gaiman English way of putting it.
Well, yeah, that's a great metaphor, actually. So I don't know the author's name, but right now I'm reading a book and it's blowing my mind. It's about Toronto and the Depression. It's called Cabbage
Ooh.
Town.
Ooh.
And I found this book at the library. Sometimes they throw out books.
Hmm.
So sometimes when I'm eating my lunch, there's a like I'm next to the trash and there's this big bag of books in a garbage bag. There, so sometimes I go garbage sifting, and I see what I can find. And I found this book. I had no clue. I'd never heard of the author, nothing. And I've cried like 3 times so far reading this book. It's absolutely
Wow.
amazing. So I would highly recommend it. Cabbage Town. I don't even know the author's name, but it's so good. I also just finished. I listen to a lot of audiobooks because
Hmm.
I walk a lot, and I wanna. I I have such a bad memory, but I have it here. So it's Night Without End by Alistair MacLean. It's a literary
Ooh,
thriller, and
yes.
it's about these guys. They're working in the Arctic, and a plane crashes, and
Hmm.
then there's just it's just absolutely incredible. So I'm going to read more from him because he's
Hmm.
yeah, literally thrillers nowadays. Like when you read a thriller, it's very kind of like simplistic Hemingway writing, where it's
Hmm.
very like straight action. It's not very literary. It's just like straight action. Um, and this was the first literary thriller that I've read really, and it's amazing, like blowing my mind.
Hmm.
It's changed the way I see thrillers. That you
Hmm.
can you can have when you think literary fiction, you think like long, drawn out, slow burn. Um, but the adrenaline levels were just
Hmm.
peaking, and and there's all kinds of different things: man versus man, man versus nature, man versus himself. Like all kinds of conflicts that just have you so immersed from start to finish. So again, I can't recommend that book enough. And what else have I been reading?
We actually just did an episode recently on the podcast with Stephen Hartov, author of Last of the Seven, the discussing Alistair MacLean's Ice Station Zebra. So, like, you
Oh, so
you are,
you're
I'm
familiar.
familiar with him, and I'm like, yes, this is brilliant. You are 100% on point. MacLean is
Oh,
such a perfect rabbit hole to
yeah.
go down.
So
Good,
do you
good
have
taste.
is there any other books you can suggest from him?
I highly recommend it's called The Golden Rendezvous. It has
The
this
Golden
amazing
Rendezvous.
Agatha Christie-esque element where like it's a mystery in the first half that then resolves and becomes this huge like James Bond-esque thriller in the final.
That's that's what he's like. He's like a James
Hmm.
Bond type of thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's great. Oh, I just saw another one that One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I
Ooh.
didn't even know it was a book. I thought it was just a
Hmm.
movie. And it's narrated by the Indian, the native Indian, who in the movie like doesn't say he doesn't say like 4 words. But
That's
it's
amazing.
narrated by him, which I thought was pretty clever and funny. But
Someone at
also,
the production company was like, here is some delicious irony that we could just.
yeah, it's really cool. But yeah, that was a very good book too. And I felt very connected to that character where he doesn't think he's crazy, but he's in a crazy place with all these other crazy people. Um, and I think it's very easy to feel like that sometimes, but
Yeah.
we are, but I think sometimes you have to admit we are a little crazy too. So um, but yeah, I thought that was a great book. Yeah, just basically I just have audiobooks on loop, and whatever I can get my hands on, whether picking through the library garbage or there's a website that's really good that sells secondhand books, thrift books. Um,
Yes. Hmm.
yes, and I've used them to get some cheaper reading material. They're really good.
Hmm. I also
Yeah,
like the fact that they'll have like some obscure stuff from time to time too. That
yeah.
so like I love obviously collecting books.
Yes, you have a very nice
Sometimes,
collection.
thank you. Some of these are thrift book purchases
Yeah.
because trying to find like that specific edition of something, or like I ordered a copy of Raymond Benson's The Black Stiletto, and I was trying to find like a first edition copy, and I found one through thrift books.
Yeah, no, it's a great resource.
So what's next? Where we've got Wedding Bandits, it comes out what day?
So the on the 4th is the paperback release, and the 11th is the ebook release, and I separated them because we were talking about reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And so with paperback, you can get some reviews. I didn't even know you can't review until it's released. I think we were talking about this, right? Because I
Yeah.
was, and you can leave a review if you want, but and you can't leave it until it's published. So I didn't know this. Again, greenhorn, learning as I go. But so on the 11th, the ebook comes out, and I've just been doing like a crash course in Amazon ads,
Mm-hmm.
because that's an avenue that I want to take. And again, it's pretty new and it's a lot to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm doing the best I can, but I want to hit the ground running, and as soon as it gets out, start running these ads, and hopefully I can amass these reviews that are so important.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, like as you've been going through and learning these things for book marketing, what has
Mhm.
been like the biggest wow moment or the thing that you have learned in this process you would want to every aspiring author that's going to self-publish know?
Okay, well, we were talking about book sirens, and book sirens was good, but if you're building a newsletter,
Mm-hmm.
Prolific Works, uh, if you do the medium, there's a free one, there's a pro one, and then there's a medium one, and the medium one is $20 a month, but it every time someone takes your book and opts in for the email address,
Mm-hmm.
it records it for you, and then you can export it.
Oh,
So
nice.
so my newsletter was basically built from Prolific Works. I got a few reviews on Book Sirens, but Prolific Works I think is great if you're building a newsletter. Also have a newsletter. I think that's a great way to keep in contact with your fans or readers. And kind of it's a good way to get rid of the third party too. If the closer you can be with your
Mm-hmm.
readership, then the less Amazon or YouTube or whatever you need. I mean, those things are great, but
Mm-hmm. They're
um,
just channels. They're not direct relationships.
exactly, exactly. And other than that, pre-production. Yeah, that was pretty much it. So Goodreads, like I said, I contacted 200 people. I got one review, and a lot of people don't like you asking for a review for your book on Goodreads, which is fair enough. So that's why I always try to be very respectful and only go for people who have had really good things to say about a book that I thought was very similar. Um, and would I do it again on the next book? I probably wouldn't. I would probably stick to Prolific Works.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I haven't I haven't bought reviews yet, and I don't want to because I would
Yeah.
rather spend my money on advertisements. I
Yeah.
think, but again, I'm learning as I go, so I wouldn't be the best person to give advice, but I'm going to stick with Amazon ads. I have a YouTube ad as well. And I'm also going to give the audiobook free on YouTube. I know
Oh,
that's
cool.
it's kind of counterproductive. Oh, the audiobook, by the way, I recorded myself.
Awesome.
So it's another
Congrats.
good way if you're on a budget is to do a lot of these things yourself. I did pay for someone to edit it, but I
Mm-hmm.
did a sneaky thing, and now I have the waveform from the ACX Audible approved, so I know exactly how it has to look.
Nice.
And so
Yes.
I've done research on how to mix and whatever. So now I have
Mm-hmm.
this sample and the knowledge. So the
Mm-hmm.
next time I can do it myself. So I would say eliminating bills is the key thing, especially if you want to be like if you want to
Consistent.
constantly be releasing, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
constantly releasing books, you'll be broke if you keep spending
Yeah.
like $5,000 on an editor. Also, I don't know if this is the best thing to say, but I use Grammarly for editing. I use Grammarly
Mm-hmm.
Pro.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't hired an editor, but I've run it through Grammarly many times, and I've
Mm-hmm.
rewrote it and edited
Mm-hmm.
so many times that I could probably recite it. Um, but if you have to be conscious of your budget
Mm-hmm.
and make it work because there are expenses, you know,
Oh,
that
yeah. Well, and it's finding what's the things you want to spend money on. The
exactly.
so I've self-published two books so far. First one, I went through like Book Baby and they were great, they were fine, but my realization after that process was that I could do it more inexpensively, just direct on Kindle,
Mm,
Amazon, etc. But also I figured out, okay, there I can use Fiverr for cover design, formatting. I could
Exactly.
find someone editor there. I could get my own formatting program. Like the formatting software, I'm like, okay, realistically, there are plenty of options here. But
Mhm.
it's just cool finding those things where you figure out what's the competency you want to do and you like doing, and it's fun. I'm As far as going over the book multiple times, I saw a tweet that was like, it's a good thing. Always write the book you want to read because you will read it 100 times.
Yes, yes, very much so. Very much so.
So what
Yeah.
comes after Wedding Bandits? You said you've written 6 books since. Are any of
Yes.
them in the can for, like, I heard someone say once that one of the best things you can do once you publish your first book is have your second book ready to publish
Mhm.
within like a year or so. Is that the intention? What's the plan? What do you want to tell us?
Okay, well, I was originally set to do a book a year, but
Hmm.
now that I'm writing so many books, I'm like, I'm scared I'm gonna die before I get these books out. Uh, so if depending on Wedding Bandits, if I get a decent reception from Wedding Bandits, then I'm gonna try to release the second book in March of 2025, and then another book in September. So kind
Okay.
of speed it up to do 2 books a
Hmm.
year. If I don't, then I'm going to continue to study my marketing tactics and try to
Hmm.
keep it for a
Hmm.
book a year. Now, the next book, and Wedding Bandits, I went a little hard on female insecurities. I was
Yes.
pretty
I
blunt
was
about it.
very impressed that you, for the record, I was impressed that you did that because the thing that confidence men thrive on is when people working on insecurities, one, two, there are moments where you're like, shouldn't this person know very clearly that this is a too good to be good true situation? But people believe what they absolutely want to believe,
Yes.
despite all evidence to the contrary. So anyway, sorry, I sidetracked you, but compliment
No,
to you did a great job using that as a narrative plot point without
thank
it
you.
feeling cheap.
Thank you very much. I would just like to know if anyone does read it and think that I was unfair, that the second one, I go much harder on male insecurities.
Hmm.
Much harder. So it's a book about a shady private investigator, a
Ooh.
modestly endowed porn actor, and a shrewd con woman, and they're trying to lure a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical uh, conglomerate into a sexual harassment lawsuit. So, um, which is basically about this modestly endowed porn actor. So, he's kind of their tool to get
No pun
people
intended.
harass. So it's a little bit more of a humorous. This one was, I would say, it's a dark comedy, and I would say the second one is more of a comedy.
Hmm.
But it still has that noir feel. And there's a female lead, and like I say, it goes a little bit harder on male insecurities to even things out. But I really enjoyed writing it, and it's after that I started doing a little bit of horror.
Hmm.
So I can feel I'm kind of moving away from noir as I go. The latest book I did was, I would call it something like cringe fiction, because it's like it's a horror, but it we were talking about insecurities and stuff like that, and like the it it's just very raw with the desire for youth,
Mm.
and all the things that can go wrong
Hmm.
with our our desire to stay young,
Hmm.
and the problems that can cause, emotional, physical, you know.
It's kind of
um
like a Twilight Zone
yes,
thing from
yes,
what you're describing right now. And
yes.
actually, that's interesting because like I can kind of see that vibe then in Wedding Bandits and what you've described with your next book
Mhm.
is it does have that eh, not a morality play in the sense like when we talk about things being, oh, it's just a morality play. It's very clear, good guys, bad guys, whatever. It has that, which I think is what good noir should be to a certain extent. It's like that Alfred Hitchcock or Twilight Zone thing where, oh, bad people do bad things and they eventually receive their comeuppance in a very ironic fashion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Def definitely, definitely. That's what it is. But in these books, I like you to follow that
Hmm.
person um as they go down that road of villainy,
Hmm.
and see how logically you might also make
Hmm.
those decisions. Because a lot of times, when there's a villain, especially like nowadays, like the villain is so starkly a villain. You know, he's a Bond villain. You know, like there's
Hmm.
there's very like clear hero and villain. And with my books, I like to make it, well, I like him, but yeah, he is kind of a villain, or he's a hero, but he's kind of a dick. And so like, and I think that describes life more authentically, is that, you know, all of us, I think, try to be good.
Hmm.
Um, but whether it works out that way is kind of a different story. And sometimes our desires trump our morality.
Hmm.
But we always find a way to justify it in our heads. And I think when you read a story like that and it does kind of sit with you, it maybe helps you reflect on your own clandestine motives, right? Even if it doesn't make you a born again Christian, it like it kind of gives you the sense of like we are all flawed, and
Hmm.
I guess it's really up to you once you have that knowledge where you want to take it, and I guess the consequences will be there to justify your actions. Yeah.
Hmm. Something that I'd be remiss in doing if we didn't bring it up. I never asked you to give a plot synopsis on Wedding Bandits. I think that the title does a great job of just giving us the general gist. But just for the audience at home, can you give us just a quick, this is what the story is? Just the log line. What can people expect from reading Wedding Bandits?
Oh man, I had such a good one on the Amazon page. It's I don't know if I come up with it right on the spot here. And oh man, can I just read it?
Yep, feel free.
All right. Um,
This is what the good Amazon description of a book
I
is.
feel like I did such a good job with the so okay, here we are. A team of con artists travel the country marrying rich, unsought women only to clean them out on their wedding night. The only problem is their last mark's father happens to be a secret underworld kingpin now bent on avenging his homely daughter's broken heart.
It's which also, for the record, that is such a great, concise, this is the hook, this is what to do. And that is so important when self-publishing is knowing how to
Yes.
describe the blurb.
Yes, very much so. The words in self-publishing, when you start to learn all about keywords and trying to hit the algorithm and stuff like that, it's it almost takes away from some of the creativity because
Hmm.
it's so scientifically, and you can even see like some people have to modify their titles so that they can fit in with the category better. So uh, or they choose what they're going to write based on a category that doesn't have so much competition.
Hmm.
So they almost mold themselves to the algorithm. Um, I don't know. That's just a random thought, but yeah, it's a different. Amazon is a different animal, I think, than just the free creative mind of a writer. Once you get into Amazon, they kind of like beat
They
you and mold you
chisel
into
away
shit.
your uniqueness till you fit within a box so
Yes,
that they
exactly,
can market
exactly.
you.
Yeah, yeah. It's a little soul crushing, but you know what? Any entertainment, any professional entertainment,
Yes.
you got to understand that that magic, fantastical
Hmm.
feeling you get, it dulls a little to make way for the business side of things, which is what capitalism is about. It's making
Yeah.
money, and if you can make money while making art, then you hit the jackpot, I think.
I always go to, there's a quote by Walt Disney. We don't make movies to make money. We make money so we can make more movies.
Huh. Well, yeah, that sounds good. But I think they make movies to make
I
money.
think that they make movies to make money. I think Walt Disney was being a little idealistic, and I choose to
Yeah,
live within the idealism and go, oh, I'd like to make more, please. Um,
yeah.
Wedding Bandits, the paperback comes out on the 5th or the 4th?
Fourth.
4th. Celebrate your independence by getting a copy of Wedding Bandits. Ebook will be available on the 11th. Oswald, where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
OswaldBlack.com will have consistent updates and a couple videos of my journey that are just about the author side, about what
Mhm.
I'm up to and how I'm progressing and the challenges I face and if the things I do work out or not. So it's a little bit of a resource for writers that are up and coming. And then there's also links to all my audiobooks, reviews, stuff like that. So it's just basically a one-stop shop where you can get all the Oswald Black information that's out there.
Awesome. We will link it in the show notes. Thank you again for coming on the show. It's been a
Thanks so
blast.
much for having me.